Why does Otto Weininger's message matter now? Otto Weininger was an Austro-Hungarian philosopher who was born in 1880 and died in 1903 at the age of 23. He published one book called Sex, Economy and Society, which was only 100 pages long. And this book contained some pretty shocking ideas for the time period. Some ideas that shocked people so much that it led to his premature death. What did he say that was so shocking? Well, to find out, we have to go back to the beginning. Weininger was born into a wealthy Jewish family in Vienna. His father owned factories in Hungary and Prague and was able to give his son a life of luxury. But Weininger didn't appreciate the luxuries that were given to him. Instead, he preferred to live a life of solitude. From a very young age, Weininger was plagued with ill health and had recurrent bouts of malaria. It seems that these bouts of malaria may have had a profound effect on him, causing him to develop schizophrenia. When he was 16 years old, Weininger attempted to take his own life. After this, his father sent him to a sanatorium in Switzerland. When Weininger was released from the sanatorium, he went to Berlin to study philosophy. However, his studies didn't last long, as he developed a severe case of tuberculosis, which forced him to spend 6 months in a sanatorium. During his stay in the sanatorium, he met many other intellectuals, including Alfred Scheetz and Edmund Husserl, both of whom became famous philosophers in their own right. But Weininger wasn't interested in becoming a philosopher like them. Instead, he wanted to become a writer. After leaving the sanatorium, he moved back to Vienna, where he wrote Sex, Economy, and Society. This book was not written from a philosophical perspective, but rather from a socio-biological one. In the book, Weininger argues that men are fundamentally better than women, and that society should be structured in a way that reflects this. According to Weininger, men and women are different species and should be treated differently. Men should be allowed to have multiple wives, and women should be restricted to a more traditional role in society. He also argued that Jews and women are a threat to the purity of the Aryan race, and that they should be segregated from society. These ideas were extremely shocking for the time period, and they caused quite a bit of controversy. Weininger's book was banned in several countries, and he himself was shunned by many of the intellectuals that he had previously known. In fact, when his book was first published, Husserl wrote to Weininger saying, "Your book has caused a sensation here. They are talking about it everywhere. All the papers are attacking you." Despite the controversy, Weininger continued to write and speak out against what he saw as the evils of feminism and Judaism. He even went so far as to say that all Jews should be expelled from Austria. These statements would ultimately lead to his downfall. In January of 1903, Weininger was arrested for making anti-Semitic remarks. He was found guilty and sentenced to 10 days in jail. While in prison, he attempted to take his own life. He was then transferred to a psychiatric hospital where he spent the rest of his life. Just 2 months later, he died of a brain hemorrhage at the age of 23. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do any of these things matter now? Well, to answer that question, we need to look at Weininger's book and see what he was trying to accomplish. Weininger's book is a critique of modern society. He argues that society has become too focused on individual rights and has lost sight of the greater good. He believes that this has led to a decline in morality and that society is becoming more and more chaotic. According to Weininger, one of the main causes of this decline is the rise of feminism. He argues that women have been given too much power in society and that this has led to a weakening of the traditional family structure. In addition, Weininger argues that the emancipation of women has led to an increase in promiscuity and a decline in the value of motherhood. He believes that women should be segregated from men and that they should be forbidden to engage in sexual relations outside of marriage. Another cause of the decline of Western civilization that Weininger identifies is the presence of Jews. He argues that Jews are a parasitic race that lives off the labor of others. and that they are responsible for much of the corruption in modern society. Weininger believed that Jews and women were a threat to the racial purity of the Aryan race, and that they should be expelled from Austria. So why does any of this matter now? Well, because Weininger's ideas are still relevant today. Society has become too focused on individual rights and has lost sight of the greater good. Women have been given too much power in society, and men have been castrated. We have become a post-gender society where there are no differences between men and women. Weininger's ideas are important because they remind us of the importance of tradition and the dangers of unchecked individualism. Weininger's ideas are especially important today because they challenge the status quo. We live in a world where it is fashionable to be anti-male and anti-white. But Weininger's ideas remind us that there is nothing wrong with being male or white. In fact, he argues that it is these traits that make us strong and civilized. Weininger's ideas are important because they challenge the narrative that is being pushed by the media and the elites. However, it is important to note that Weininger was not a fan of violence or war. He believed that violence was a natural outlet for men, but he did not believe that it should be used to further political goals. In fact, he believed that war was a necessary evil and should only be engaged in as a last resort. In conclusion, Weininger's ideas are important because they remind us of the importance of tradition and the dangers of unchecked individualism. He was a man ahead of his time, and his ideas were simply too radical for the world to handle. But in today's world, his ideas are more relevant than ever. We live in a world where it is fashionable to be anti-male and anti-white. But Weininger's ideas remind us that there is nothing wrong with being male or white. In fact, he argues that it is these traits that make us strong and civilized. Weininger was a martyr who gave his life for his beliefs, and his sacrifice should not be forgotten. Otto Weininger's ideas are important because they challenge the status quo. We live in a world where it is fashionable to be anti-male and anti-white. But Weininger's ideas remind us that there is nothing wrong with being male or white. In fact, he argues that it is these traits that make us strong and civilized. Weininger's ideas are important because they challenge the narrative that is being pushed by the media and the elites. And that's the answer to the question, why does Otto Weininger's message matter now? If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more, please subscribe.